Hello, and welcome back to another episode of 8-Bit Monsters Monster Deconstruction for D&D 5th Edition. Today we're going to look at the hook horror found in the Monsters Manual on page 189. The hook horror is a CR3 monster worth 700 XP, and when we look at Xanathar's Guide for Encounter Building, we'll see that as a group monster, it'll take 6 players at 3rd level to fight one of these, 4 players at 4th level, or 2 players at 5th and 6th level. 6th level not shown. Because I'm a lazy DM and saving myself time. That's why. So, where was I? If you wanted to use this monster as an epic encounter, you could use this for 5 players at 2nd level, 4 players at 3rd level. And then finally, if you're looking to have your players solo this monster, you could start putting this hook horror up against one player at 7th level and above. Now there is a certain point at which the hook horror will no longer be a good solo monster, probably around 10th level or higher, and you can actually start using 2 hook horrors against 1 player. Just being a lazy DM again and saving time, but if you insist, here's the table when this will happen. Okay, let's continue on. Moving on, we'll get right into the TLDW. For the DCR, I found it to be a 2. For the OCR, I found a 4. And for the FCR, I found a 3, which is great again. We have the printed value of the hook horror. And if this trend keeps up as with last week's monster, these videos may not be as interesting as I was hoping. Now that we're done with the TLDW, if you're still curious to see where the numbers come from for this hook horror, let's get right into the skills and traits. Reviewing the skills and traits, we'll see that our hook horror has a proficiency bonus of +2 because of its low CR rating. Now, luckily, we don't have too much to worry about in this area, and the only real thing that the hook horror has for skills is perception at +3, which comes from the +1 wisdom bonus and the +2 proficiency. Beyond that, there's only some senses that it has of blind sight and dark vision, and nothing really else going on there. So we'll jump right down into the traits area and take a look at the 2 traits it has and see if anything's affecting the monster there. Now, the hook horror has a new trait called echolocation, and this allows the hook horror to be able to see things while blind, which could actually say that this hook horror is probably blind to begin with, although it does have dark vision for 120 feet. Oh, come on, troll. I don't know why it has both. I didn't develop this monstrosity. Anyway. Now the echolocation is actually kind of a reverse trait. It actually lets the DM know that if the hook horror is deafened, then it can't use its blind sight because it can't echolocate like a bat does. Because of this out-of-combat trait, we're going to assign no effect to the echolocation and give no bonuses to the hook horror for this trait. So let's move on to the next trait it has, which is keen hearing, and we've seen this for a few other monsters in the past. Once again, keen hearing gives no effect as well to the monster. Well, that was a pretty cut and dry skills and traits section, so let's just move right into the DCR and move this video along. Troll, you barged into my videos and started poking fun at me. It's not my fault you're bored now. Okay, anyways. For the DCR, we'll jump into the effective HP since there's nothing affecting our hook horror and take a look at its current 75 hit points coming from 10d10 plus 20. Now this is going to rate our hook horror at a DCR 1. And because there's also nothing affecting the armor class of our hook horror, we're going to take a look at its effective AC at 15. And when we take a look at the chart for our DCR 1 hook horror, we're going to see that this is expected to have an AC of 13. Now because of the natural armor of 15, this is +2 over our expected, resulting in a +1 shift from DCR 1 to DCR 2. Now that we have our DCR figured out for the hook horror, let's jump into the OCR and see what we have there. Again, our hook horror is a pretty basic monster and only has a multi-attack of 2 hook attacks. So when we take a look at the hook, we'll find that the damage from the hook is averaged at about 11 damage per swing. This is resulted from 2d6 plus 4 piercing damage and is considered an OCR 1. Now because the hook horror can swing twice during combat, we'll take the total average damage of 22 coming from 2 hook attacks and see that this is going to result in an OCR of 3. This is quite a big jump in OCR ratings from 1 hook attack to 2 hook attacks, going from an OCR of 1 to an OCR of 3. That's a pretty significant amount of damage, and even more so when we take a look at the attack bonus. Speaking of which, let's take a look at the effective attack bonus, because once again, there's nothing affecting the attack bonus, and we'll just use what was given to us in the stat blocks. So the hook horror has an effective attack bonus of +6. Taking a look at our chart, we'll see that an OCR of 3 is expected to have an attack bonus of +4. Once again, this is a +2 over the expected, resulting in a +1 shift from an OCR of 3 to OCR 4. This is pretty good considering the base damage and how quickly this hook horror's damage is ramping up. Well, since there's nothing else going on here for the OCR, let's take a look at the FCR and see what we get there. Now the FCR's rating is coming from the multi-attack, and we're going to start by putting in a DCR of 2, adding in an OCR of 4, which results in a 6, and when we average that out, we'll get a CR of 3. Perfect, we have the printed value for the hook horror. That's no surprise since we saw that already in the TLDW. So now that we have the FCR completed, let's take a look at some real short notes here as to some other things I found for the hook horror. The only note I have is about its hit points, and the max and minimum that I usually suggest during the DCR section. Currently, the hook horror is at the minimum, and sadly you can only really increase the hit dice by +1 since there's such a short range for the DCR shift here. So instead of having 10d10 hit dice, you could have 11d10 hit dice, giving it just a little bit more hit points to survive, but beyond that, there's nothing else you can do. So sadly, there's not even a huge maximum like some of these smaller monsters from the fractional CR range get. Well, with the notes taken care of, let's jump into the CR balance. So, is the CR balanced? Yep, we found it. It's once again another close range DCR versus OCR similar to last week's monster, which you can see here. Beyond that, let's take a look at the CR review and see where all of this information came from, how the hook horror differs from some of the other monsters in the same CR range. Now for the DCR, we'll see that it's 1 under the current printed CR rating. We also will see that the hit points are 2 steps under the CR rating, but the AC brings it up 1 to accommodate for the low hit points. In regards to the OCR, it's 1 step over the printed CR. Its multi-attack DPR is actually equal to the CR, which is pretty surprising. Usually it's ramped up over the printed CR. But the difference here is that the attack bonus is 2 steps over the expected rating and helps the hook horror hit more often. And as I suggested in the notes section, sadly there's no way to ramp up the hit points any higher for the hook horror. So between the 10 or 11 hit dice that it could have, there's really no way to give this hook horror any more hit points to survive combat any longer. Thank you for joining me this week as we deconstructed the hook horror from D&D 5th edition. Join me again next week as we deconstruct another monster into its barest parts and see what makes these monsters tick. If you've been enjoying these videos, I would really appreciate it if you would share these videos with your friends, your D&D groups. Shoot, if you play Pathfinder or Call of Cthulhu or any other TTRPG, consider sharing it with them. I would really appreciate it, and it could help the channel grow. Until next time, when we deconstruct another monster from D&D 5th edition, take care everyone, and I'll see you next time.